Hey team, Dan Scaro back with you today. I am in my office, sitting here having a cup of coffee. It's actually not a prop. I just happened to be drinking a cup of coffee when I sat down for this video. So you and I are having a cup of coffee today as I sit down to talk with you about an extremely important topic, and one that I think is very germane in the day and age in which we're living and the situation in which most of you find yourself in these days, and that is stress. How to manage stress, how to ask two questions that will change how you and I manage stress completely. That's a big promise, I know, but I want to walk you into this conversation and perhaps offer some thoughts for those of us, many of us, who are experiencing higher levels of stress in these days. I've been out on the road in these days and been wonderful to meet with many of you in these last weeks as I've been back on the road, and the theme I'm hearing is that many of us are stressed. We're experiencing a higher level of pressure in these days. Now, I know COVID challenged all of us. We were learning new skills. Kinds of things were changing in the life of your church, and so that demanded a much higher level of energy and was expensive to many of us emotionally and mentally and spiritually. And I'm hearing that as I have these conversations. In these days, we're dealing with the crisis related to race relations that it's happening all around the country, and that has added a whole new layer of, in some cases, beneficial, in other cases, not beneficial conversations on Facebook and other places. And you're now transitioning back to meeting in services partially, and that's complicated. Many of you are sorting through the complications of that. So I know that you're in the middle of stressful days. Knowing that, I wanted to come today and talk about three domains that impact all of our lives. And the choices we make in regards to these domains and how much energy we put into them have everything to do with how we manage stress. For many of us, we end up putting much more energy than we need to in places that are not beneficial. In fact, for many of us, that's the cause of much of our stress. When we put energy in the right places, we get traction and we get movement and we get impact. But when we put energy into the wrong places, we end up being frustrated and things don't move, and that creates a lot of tension for us. There are three domains in your life and mine that encompass almost everything we experience. These are broad, and obviously there are nuances to them, but there's the domain of control, the domain of influence, and the domain of faith. Let me explain those just a little bit. The domain of control is very simply those things which you have complete influence and complete control over. Now, you and I know that there's very little in our life that falls into this category, so probably if I were drawing this within scale, that circle would be much smaller. Really, the only thing that exists inside your domain of control is you. You can control your attitudes and your actions and your feelings, and there's a number of things you have complete control over. But beyond yourself, there's very little that you completely control. Most of our lives fall in our domain of influence, that next circle out, the red circle. And this is a place where you have some influence and some responsibility. Now, there's obviously things that are a little closer to your domain of control, and there's things on the edge of your domain of influence. For many of us, even though we don't realize it, our children are born very close to our domain of control, and over the course of 18 to 20 years, they make their way out to the edges of our domain of influence. And that's true in many situations. So there's people and things that move in these domains. The third domain is the largest in our lives, and there's really no way for me to draw this one to scale because it encompasses everything else in your life that you have no influence over and no responsibility for. So that is a huge amount of things. It's all the news that you hear from around the world. It's what's happening on Facebook. It's everything that you don't have influence and impact on. So for many of us, the challenge is knowing where to put our energy. And much of the stress that is caused in our lives is because we inappropriately put more energy into a situation or into a domain than we ought to. So we should put our first and best energy not the most, but first and best into our domain of control. In other words, managing ourselves, having self-leadership in our lives. If we put our first and best energy there, then it influences the next domain, which is the one where we experience most of our life. There are things that fall outside of your domain of control and domain of influence and live in that outer circle that you can put a lot of energy into. You can spend a lot of emotional energy and a lot of thinking energy in something that you cannot change. Now, the other spectrum that you'll notice on here is a line that runs from the past into the future. And it's extremely important that when you decide where to put energy, you remember that energy spent thinking about or having an emotion about the past is a waste of time. The past is gone. And energy that you spend maybe worrying about the future is also a waste of time. The future is not here now. So what you need to do as a leader, in order to not be stressed out, in order to maximize the amount of energy you have and to make the most impact, you have to focus on what is now, this moment, and decide, is this issue or this person or this, whatever it might be for you, in my domain of control now? Is it in my domain of influence now? Or is it in my domain of faith now? If it's in your domain of control, you should give it some energy. You should give it lots of energy. If it's in your domain of influence, you should give it the energy necessary to create the movement and to offer leadership in that domain. If it's in your domain of faith, there's nothing you can do about it but pray. If you have no influence and no responsibility, then don't spend any energy at all on something somebody posts on Facebook or something you see on the news that you can't do anything about, especially if it's in the past or in the future. That's an exceptional waste of time. Now, the only caveat to this that you need to remember is that planning that you do for the future, mapping out a plan, that's time well spent. That's in your domain of control, and it is future-oriented, but planning is different than worrying. For about 15 years, I've been using this with leaders around the country to help them frame their thinking about energy and where they put it. Much of our stress in our life is that we give equal energy to everything, and we give lots of energy to things that don't yield any return. So, dear friends, I want to encourage you as you experience the complexity of these days, and I know it's complex. I know you're experiencing lots of opinions and perspectives on when church should open and how it should open and what ministries should happen and who wants to sing and who needs to wear face masks, and all of these things are in play. And that's on top of everything else that's complicated in your life. It's not like the rest of your life went away in the middle of all this. And so in these days, you've got your hands full. I know that. This simple strategy, by asking two questions: what domain is this in, whatever situation you're dealing with? What domain is this in, and how much energy should I give to it? Will help you make better decisions about all the many things that are happening in your life. Friends, you know I care about you. My hope is that you become better every day at leadership and at parenting and at pastoring and all the different responsibilities that God has given you. My hope and my prayer for you every day is that you'd get better, that you'd grow, you'd become more effective. And being bogged down by stress will hinder that. So my hope in this video is that just to offer you a tool and a way of thinking that might help in these days. Is this issue in my domain of control? Is this issue in my domain of influence? Is this issue in my domain of faith? A simple question that can change everything in terms of how you manage your day. Friends, know that I'm praying for you constantly, each day. For many of you, each day I'm praying for you by name, not for all of you by name every day, but regularly I make my way through praying for you. I'm praying that God will bless you, will fill you, will give you the strength and the wisdom you need for these days. Complex days are days of opportunity for your growth and the expansion of His kingdom. Lean in, my friends, and grow today. Get better. and advance the kingdom. Thank you for being a partner in what God is doing in the North Central District to make sure that every man, woman, and child has an opportunity to hear the gospel and respond, to be a partner in helping your church be a light in the community that you're in, and to be a partner in raising up the next generation or 2 or 3 of leaders who will advance the kingdom. Friends, those are the tasks that we're involved in here in the North Central District, and I'm grateful that you're a team member and a partner on this journey. God bless you.